September was a great start to fall recruiting for Alabama, but October could be even bigger. And in this video, we're going to explain that Alabama is in the thick of it with some major recruiting battles, and they're trying to flip some guys as well. We're going to break it all down with one of the top experts in the Alabama market. But first, Alabama fans, subscribe to the On3 Recruiting channel. We are getting this thing going. It's blowing up. It's only about a month old. We want to make sure Alabama fans are jumping on board. Hit subscribe. All right, let's bring on Joseph Hastings from Bama Online. We'll get to the good news, Joseph, but maybe start with some bad news first. I want to ask, is Alabama fading for four-star edge Solomon Williams? He was at Texas A&M this weekend. He's been to Texas. I thought it was a two-team race between Texas and Alabama, but is there some concern over where Texas A&M sits?
Yeah, so it appeared coming into the season that Alabama had all the momentum in Solomon Williams' recruitment. You know, he took that official visit to Bama back during the summer. It was the only official visit that he took in his recruiting process to that point. He had also set up an unofficial visit to Bama for the Texas game on September 9th. Alabama obviously ended up losing that game, but you would have liked to have gotten him in town for that game. He didn't end up going. Instead, ended up going to Texas A&M a couple of weeks later for their game against Auburn. Visited Texas for an official visit a couple weekends ago, and then, as you mentioned, visited Texas A&M on an official visit this past weekend. So obviously the Aggies do have some reason for optimism just based on the frequency of visits, how many times he's been able to get on campus, and, you know, him going on his own dime for that unofficial in September. But, you know, as for the Alabama side of things, as I mentioned, they got that official visit during the June official visit slate. They're also going to get him on campus for their game against Tennessee on October 21st. You know, I had an opportunity to speak with Solomon Williams earlier this week. He says that he still has high interest in Alabama, spoke with Nick Saban a couple of weeks ago, is maintaining regular contact with the coaching staff. So, you know, Bama is definitely still a contender in this recruitment. I don't think it's a two-team battle between Texas and Texas A&M. I think Alabama is definitely in the mix there, with Oregon and Clemson being on the outside looking in. But, you know, it's going to come down to the wire. I don't think he's really firm on a decision timeline just yet. He had mentioned October 16th, his mother's birthday, as a potential decision date,
Right.
but says it's going to happen after that later in October or sometime in November. So just remains to be seen.
All right, well, that'll be crucial, getting him back on campus in late October. That's why the month of October is such a pivotal month, because right after that, decisions are getting made. All right, speaking of the month October, when things heat up, Zay Mincy, the four-star DB, top 75 player overall. He's a safety prospect out of Daytona Beach, Florida, and he is a highly coveted prospect. The in-state schools, the big three, Florida State, and Miami, would love to keep him in state. But, of course, Alabama's involved, and they're going to get him on campus later. What do you think Alabama's chances are as we wait on his official visit to Tuscaloosa?
Yeah, so I think it kind of remains to be seen just until he takes that official to Alabama, because, you know, he did go during the summer, took an unofficial visit there. I think it's interesting to note that his half-brother plays at Alabama State. So, you know, there is a little bit of a connection to the state of Alabama. But, you know, the in-state schools obviously do have reason for optimism, as you mentioned, Florida, Miami, Florida State. And if I was to take, you know, him staying in the state of Florida versus him going elsewhere, at the moment, that's what I would take. You know, obviously Alabama has 6 defensive back commitments in this class, but they're really high on Zay as a prospect, just in terms of his versatility, what he can bring to the table as both a cornerback and a safety prospect. So, you know, Bama's really high on him. You know, he's maintaining contact with Travaris Robinson and other members of the staff. But this official visit is obviously going to be an important one for the weekend of the Tennessee game, just to see where things truly stand with him and the Crimson Tide. I think it's really interesting because he's not going to announce his decision until January at the All-American Bowl, if I'm not mistaken. So, you know, there's going to be a long time to figure out where he actually ends up going. But, you know, Alabama's still a player in this one. You know, they're going to be getting him on campus for an official visit. And if Bama's able to get someone on campus for multiple days, with Nick Saban having that last pitch, you can never rule them out.
All right, let's crank it up a little bit. Alabama fans love to hear about 5-star offensive line targets, and Jordan Seaton is a major one. He's the number 2 ranked offensive tackle in the country, and he's been to Alabama 2 times since July. Now, there's no decision time soon. I talk to Jordan Seaton all the time. He doesn't have a date at all, but my guess is he goes sometime in December. So do you think, as it stands now, we know there's a lot of recruiting left, but as it stands now, do you think Alabama sits in that pole position for Jordan Seaton?
I'd like to add that Alabama fans like to hear five-star offensive tackles out of IMG Academy.
Yeah, that's
Obviously,
true.
that's it. That is an area that Bama's had a lot of success in when it comes to recruiting offensive tackles, and they've done an excellent job with Jordan Seaton, getting him on campus multiple times throughout the year and for an official visit. And he's expected to return for the Tennessee game on October 21st. Obviously we'll see if that transpires with unofficials. You just never know, but that's the expectation right now. So once again, Alabama's in a good spot there. He's talked about them being a program near the top of his recruitment. He's formed a great relationship with offensive line coach Eric Wolford. And if he was to commit today, Alabama would probably be my pick. But like you mentioned, it's likely to take place a little bit later on in the recruiting process, whether it's during early signing period or sometime else in December, earlier than that. But Alabama's sitting in a good position with him. He likes what he's seen from them. I think Caden Proctor, five-star offensive tackle from the 2023 cycle, being their starting left tackle, as a true freshman, that's something that he's taking into consideration. If you're that guy, you're that dude, and he's drawn a lot of praise. Jordan has, from the likes of Shannon Terry's and other throughout his season for how well he's done. You could potentially go in Alabama and have an opportunity to start as a freshman. So I think he's taking all of that into account.
Yeah, he's outstanding. And, to be honest with you, I don't even think Alabama needs to get him on campus for another visit this fall. I think they're in a good spot regardless. But if he does show up for that Tennessee game, then I think maybe we can start making some predictions. All right, not just yet. Now, we know down the stretch, Alabama will do their fair share of flipping other teams' commitments. And we're gonna talk about that in a minute. But there's some Alabama commitments that have been taking visits elsewhere. Some of them include Jeremiah Beeman, Caleb Odom, Ryan Williams, but there's been others. Is there anybody, though, out there that Alabama fans really need to be keeping an eye on in terms of their own commitments?
I don't think there's really any too much of a concern right now as it pertains to the 2024 and 2025 classes with Alabama. When you look at all of these visits that have been taking place elsewhere, the commitments have informed the staff that they will be going to these schools. I think that's pretty important to know. It's not like they're taking these visits without any communication with the staff. Caleb Odom's obviously going to be taking he took an unofficial visit to Ole Miss. October 7th is going to line up an official visit to the program November 4th. He obviously just recently visited Auburn as well. So, he's taking multiple visits, but told Bama Online and on three's Chad Simmons that he's locked in with Alabama 100%. He's recruiting the other guys to the Crimson Tide, most notably his quarterback USC commitment, Julian Lewis. Jeremiah Beeman, took that visit to Colorado last month. Took an official visit to Auburn, is expected to return to Colorado for an official visit and, could potentially get on Auburn's campus again for the Iron Bowl. So, obviously, with how many times he's visiting those schools, that's something to keep in mind. But he's continued to remain locked in with Alabama, has continued to state that over the past few months, even as he's taken these trips elsewhere. Remember, he did take an unofficial to Auburn in June as well. And with how close he is to Auburn, it's not really too much of a surprise, especially with those in-state prospects. Caleb Odom only lives about an hour away. Ryan Williams, as you mentioned before, he lives close to Auburn, and his father played for the Tigers. So, just considering all of that, the geographical locations, wanting to see big games, it's not really too much of a surprise that they're taking these visits. But, to answer your question again, there doesn't seem to be too much of a concern with Alabama's current commitments.
All right. Well, there's one target. Now, Alabama will be going flip shopping later down the road, but there's just one I want to highlight right now, and that's Missouri defensive line commitment Elias Williams, 6'4", 275, out of the Tampa Bay area down there in Florida. And there's some smoke about Alabama being involved. What are your sources saying on a potential flip here?
Yes, so Elias Williams, as you mentioned, 6'4", 270 pounds, somebody who added 30 pounds during the offseason, really caught Alabama's attention. Because Bama was in contact with him back in the spring, but once he added that weight, they extended the offer and got to see him in person. He's scheduled an official visit to Alabama for the weekend of the LSU game, the first weekend of November. Also didn't rule out an unofficial visit to Alabama this month, though. It's unlikely to happen just based on the schedule with his school and the traveling involved on officials. But he's definitely expressing high interest in Alabama. Had a conversation with Nick Saban recently as well. He's in constant communication with the staff, every single day. And we just ran a feature on him at BamaOnline.com that I would highly encourage everyone to check out. But Elias Williams is definitely someone to watch out for in terms of when you look at Alabama's 2024 class, only having 2 defensive linemen currently committed. So they're involved with a couple of other D linemen, but Elias Williams is definitely a name to know. And the fact that they're getting him on campus for an official visit, the Missouri commitment is definitely showing high interest in the Crimson Tide.
All right. Well, that sets the table for what could be a very exciting October. Kind of as we get closer to December, each of these months gets more and more important. And if you're going to follow along, go to BOL, Bama Online, where Joseph Hastings drops all of his intel. Joseph, thank you for taking a little bit of time to stop by the Inside Scoop today.
Josh, thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed that content, be sure to subscribe to the On3 Recruits channel. We have a new page dedicated only to recruiting. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now.